Hi, everyone. My name is Ryan Booz. I'm a Postgres advocate at Redgate Software, and I thought I would start to record videos this year for Advent of Code, specifically around Postgres and SQL. Now, it's not because I'm a Postgres or SQL wizard. I've been using it for a number of years. I've been doing data and SQL stuff for literally a couple decades, but I feel like I'm always learning something new. A few people in the community that I really respect for their knowledge and just the way that they've helped me learn more about Postgres specifically and just the SQL language itself and capabilities. I saw them starting to tweet about Advent of Code. I recently just switched jobs to Redgate Software, and it's really allowed me some opportunity to revisit basics in Postgres to be a better help to our clients in the community. And so as I saw them tweeting about it, doing this just in SQL, that sounds like a lot of fun. I want to see what I can learn trying it myself, and then if I get stuck, learning from what they've figured out. Every time that I've really gotten to interact with either of them, it's just been a great experience. So I just want to flip over, see what we can do with this. My goal is to try and record a video for every puzzle. Now, I am a week behind. I know that. Again, it's been a whirlwind of a month or two for me as I switch jobs. And so hopefully as I catch up, this becomes a little bit more real time. But I just thought it might be helpful to have these available, show you my thought process, and maybe I'll hopefully learn something from each of you if this is interesting. Just share knowledge together, right? So that's the goal. Let me go ahead and flip over. And here we go. So this is Advent of Code. This is the day one puzzle. And so the basics are, with Advent of Code, there's a puzzle each year. This year, it's about the elves getting ready. And every day, there's something new. You can answer 2 questions per day based on the data input. And so I want to see what I can do with SQL. So for this puzzle, it's a pretty straightforward concept. Given a text file, I think there are about 3,000 lines in here. We can see in a second. Every group of numbers is let me see if I can get my pointer going here. So every group of numbers is an elf. And the first question is, sum each elf's, these are calories. So this is basically food items they have with them, total calories per food item. Sum each of them up. And so per elf, what's the total number of calories each elf has on them? And then find the elf with the greatest number. You don't need the elf number. You just need the total calorie count for the elf with the most number of calories that in their possession. So, there's this break. What denotes each elf is that blank line. And so flipping over SQL, that's the input. And so for me each day, I'm going to approach this probably by taking that text file, importing it into a Postgres table, just so I have something to work with. Now, others, and I actually didn't tell you who these 2 were. I meant to do that. So Vic Faring is first person I saw tweeting about this. Vic's been doing Postgres forever, probably 20 years or more. He actually recently has been added to the SQL Standards Committee, just the general SQL Standards Committee. So that's really cool. And then Fika is someone I worked with at Timescale, just always been a really great and generous teacher when I was there. And it's anytime I see him talking about SQL, I'm sure I'm going to learn something. And so when I saw them tweeting about it, I thought I'd give it a go. So my perspective is I'm going to import this data into a table and then try and use the features and functions of Postgres, SQL as much as possible. So the attempt, see if we can do it without using PGSQL, which allows us to do more logical programming, with access to variables and all kinds of stuff. In pure SQL, just using functions that are provided with Postgres. I don't know how far we'll get. I don't know when I'll eventually have to flip over to PGSQL. It's probably going to happen, but hopefully we'll learn something. So I created this table most of the time, and the reason I said that is Fika. I noticed a lot of what he's doing is simply creating essentially a SQL file that has a not really compiled, but kind of a compiled function that he can just call, do a perform of that function. So he doesn't have to create the table. He just kind of creates the space, reads the file in, and starts to work with it. Teach their own. So this is how I'm going to approach it. So I took that data, I created that table. I took the data using the psql copy command. We'll talk about that some other time, but basically we ended up with a table that looks like this, right? So just like that text file, the only difference is I added the primary key column. And the only reason I did that incrementing column is, quite honestly, sometimes it's just helpful to know the order of rows. And I didn't know if that would be helpful or not, but I thought it would do it. And so that's why it's there. I meant to say how many total rows are there. So let's just select count from December. Oops, not doing a good job typing here, am I? From December 01. So there are, okay, 2,200 or so items between all of these elves. So for me, I just have grown to really love the aggregation and array functionality that's built right into Postgres. It has array types. I don't know why, it just intrigues me. And sometimes my brain just quickly defaults there. I knew I had this blank row, and I should have just immediately gone to how can I use that blank row, that null row, to identify the groups. I don't know why I didn't. It just isn't how I thought about it. Instead, I decided to start aggregating my my columns, my rows. So, this longer query got pretty complicated because I was just being complicated. But if I do this, I started by saying this from December 01. All right, great. So I got this string, and if you're using a programming language, you might say like, okay, I can start to do something with this. I could split these groups apart. I don't know what I'm doing here. There we go. I can split these groups apart at this character that I added in, right? So when there was a null row, I said, put a pipe in there anyway. And so then I took the next thing and I started splitting these out. I went a little bit too far there, didn't I? So I said select, and now I have this from December 01. And so now I get an array, and inside the array is a bunch of individual groups of strings. So it's an array of strings. Okay, so now I have each of the individual groupings together, and I just kept going, right? I just kept going to the next step. So then I did an unnest of each individual array inside of there. Oops, I have two selects. That's not very helpful, is it? Right, so now I unnest this. Now I get my rows back. So I have each of these strings individually with themselves. And then I had to do at least one more thing, right? I had to take those, split them apart one more time into columns. It got complicated. It's just where I went. I was having fun going from like rows to one thing, back to rows, then to figure out how to group it together and then how to sum it up. So let me take this off for a second because that's not very helpful. That's going to be for the second question. Remember, I said the first question was what is the total calorie count of, sorry, I was playing earlier and I didn't take this back. What's the total calorie count for the elf that has the most calories? And so essentially when you get to this, I get the total list and it's 66,186. Now the cool thing here is when you, in Postgres, in languages that support laterals, you can take the CTE. So this whole thing is called a CTE. It's a common table expression. So the with, cals, as, and then the parentheses, that returns as if it's a table that I can now work with, right? So I have this table cals. If I query from cals, and then I do a comma, and I have some kind of table generating function, it has access to the table before it. And that comma is literally kind of an alias to this, cross join lateral. And so that says take each row from, in this case, cals, join it to this thing over here, and every row pipe it in, and that function has access to data within that row from that table. So I can reference any column in that table. In this case, so that's just a shorthand. If I just do a comma there, that's a shorthand for cross join lateral. So string to table, I can reference, I kind of messed it up here, but that one column I called A, and that's the integer that I need. And so that's the string, take that string, split it apart into a table. So now I have this table T. Every row of the table has the elf number with it, right? So it's this number that I gave it. So I know all these rows are for this elf, and I can sum them T. Now, I had to cast it to integer. And the reason I had to do that is I just wasn't thinking, and I created this table as a text column. I just didn't feel like at that moment dropping it, recreating it, and doing this all over again. So I simply cast it to an integer. Good enough. So I get my total, and that's great. Pretty complicated. I knew it was complicated. It's like, I know that null row. I can do something with it. So I did. I thought about it for a minute. I was like, man, I'm missing something. What am I missing? I went and looked at, I think Vic's or FICA's, I'm not sure which. And I was like, of course, the filter. How could I not think about that? And so in Postgres, we have the ability to add this filter on aggregates. And what that says is, as you're using the aggregate, every row that comes into the aggregate, you can filter on it. And so as you're building up, so as I get row to row to row, I can decide, okay, I'm going to spit something out on this row. What is the input to this specific aggregate outside of maybe the total predicate? If I was filtering the whole table. What that ends up doing, it's a really simple solution. I wish I would have just thought about it. It felt kind of dumb. We're counting the number of rows that have null as we go, right? We're ordering it by the ID column I created on import, just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And so you'll see that, when I get to what's the count of the nulls before these 3 rows, there were no nulls, so it's 0. I get to this row, what's the count of nulls? 1. Hey, for the next row, how many nulls have we seen? Still 1. How many nulls? Still 1. I get down to the next one, right? This group, how many nulls have I seen? Oh, I've seen 2 now. I've seen 2. I've seen 2. Really simple solution to get that. I need that ELF number to go ahead and group. So this is way simpler. And I could simply say select, in this case, I called it calories, select calories from this, I don't know why I had a different one, right? So I said inventory instead of cows, group it by ELF, order descending, and that gets me the exact same answer. So that was simpler. 2 different ways, one really complicated, one pretty straightforward and simple to do that. So thank you to Vic and FICA. I think they both had something similar. I'm not sure if they were exactly the same. And it just was knowing that filter, really good solution. So then the second part, star 2, was simply going ahead and getting the top 3. And so I took the exact same CTE. I didn't change anything about it. This is my query internally that I had before. Up top, it's the exact same query. All I did was add a limit 3. So I'm just going to get these 3 rows down here. Oops, I'm covered up on that. But it's going to be those 3 rows. And I just made it a subselect so I could sum them. And so the total of those 3 is 196,804. So that's the answer to star number 2. And again, to show you that both solutions work, one's complicated, one's more complicated than the other. I could do the exact same thing. I could say select sum of C from, I'm going to go ahead and make this a subselect. And you always have to give a subquery an alias. So I'll just say A. Actually, I'll just say X because I have A reference elsewhere. I don't want it to get confused. And the only difference here is that I just have to say limit 3. Turns out I get the exact same answer. You might not have seen it. I did hit Control Enter in dbeaver. That executed it. I got the exact same number. So 2 different ways. One uses a whole bunch of functions and string functionality and arrays, and one just does a really simple, take that data, get the count out of it, and way simpler. So that was great. Hopefully this is helpful. Hopefully you learned something. Leave a comment if there's another way you approach this or a link to something, that'd be great. I will start to get the, hopefully by the time this video is posted, this code will be posted in my repo for the Advent of Code for 2022. Hope that was fun and helpful. Appreciate it. We'll see you in some more videos as we go. Take care.